As the evening conference came to an end, the streets of San Francisco were alive with activity. As he approached the corner of the garage, he noticed a man sitting on the curb holding a small cardboard sign that read, "Homeless veteran, anything helps." The man, who was probably in his late 50s, was wearing a fraying green jacket similar to those given out decades ago in the military. His boots were scuffed, his jeans were torn, and his face was lined with years of hardship. Elon Musk, who was known for being unpredictable, was dressed casually in a black blazer and jeans and walked alone toward the parking garage tonight, looking like any other attendee, with his face partially hidden beneath a simple baseball cap, had a serene yet aloof attitude, and Elon slowed down as his interest was aroused by the fact that he was no stranger to seeing homeless people. San Francisco's streets were filled with tales of hardship, but this man's poise stood out. Rather than pleading or shouting to onlookers, he sat quietly with his sign resting against his knees and his eyes steady but not pleading. Elon paused for a second before approaching, saying, "Hey," his voice cutting through the background din of the nearby street. "If I sit," he said, looking up in surprise for a moment, as if he wasn't sure how to react, but then he gave a small shrug. "It's a free sidewalk," he replied in a solemn yet sympathetic tone. Tucking his knees to his chest, Elon sat on the sidewalk and asked Bernie, "What's your name?" The man answered, "You're Elon." He added plainly that Bernie's countenance showed no signs of recognition, which Elon found strangely comforting because for once he wasn't being treated like a headline. "Why would you send a guy like you to the curb?" Bernie arched an eyebrow. Elon laughed quietly out of curiosity. "You seem to have a narrative, I suppose." Bernie folded his arms across his chest and leaned back a little. "Doesn't everyone agree?" Elon asked, "What's yours?" Bernie looked at him for a while before continuing. "The Marine Corps left with nothing more than a pension after serving for 20 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places. And some invisible wounds the pension didn't endure, and neither did my wife," he said, pointing to the placard next to him. Elon nodded, allowing the words to sink in after spending some time outside. "That's a difficult journey." For a brief minute, the two men sat in silence, the noises of the city filling the void as Bernie grinned, but there was no amusement in it. It could have been worse. Elon looked at the sign once more before turning back to Bernie and saying, "You seem calm." He stated that most people in your situation would be shouting or attempting to get attention. Bernie shrugged once more, saying that it doesn't really help. People either see you or they don't. Elon's phone buzzed in his pocket. However, he chose to ignore it and leaned forward, supporting his knees with his elbows. "What do you need?" "Bernie, what would be beneficial?" Bernie paused, his eyes squinting a little. "Why are you concerned?" He had encountered plenty of people who paused to talk, some out of sympathy, some to preach, but something about this man seemed different. Elon said simply, and Bernie looked at him for a moment, searching his face for some hidden motive. He reluctantly exhaled, leaning back against the wall, wondering what would help. Elon sat quietly while Bernie repeated, almost as if testing the question, "That's not something I've been asked in a while." He rubbed his beard, the gray strands catching the streetlights. The man moved on the curb to give Bernie time to collect his thoughts, then pointed to the skyline. "You know, I was a real housewife with 2 children. The Marine Corps provided me purpose and kept me going, but when your mind isn't able to relax due to PTSD, purpose is meaningless." Elon inquired softly. Bernie nodded, agreeing that it's like a shadow that remains in every packed space and every loud noise. He tapped his temple with 2 fingers and said, "I'm right back there." Physicians attempted to help with medication therapy, but it doesn't alter what you've witnessed or done. Elon leaned forward, supporting his knees with his elbows, and your family. Bernie's eyes fell to the floor as his lips formed a thin line. "I didn't mean to push them away, but my wife Janet did that and hung on for as long as she could. However, she left when I was unable to find work and the costs mounted, taking the kids. I don't blame her." Elon scowled a little but remained nothing, sensing that Bernie needed to speak up. After that, it was a steady decline. Bernie proceeded with the house, then the car. "I tried everything, night shifts, warehouse jobs, anything, but employers don't want to hire a guy like me." He pointed to his fraying jacket and worn-out boots. "It seems like the universe declares you invisible once you're out here. You haven't given up," but Elon's eyes remained fixed. Bernie held up his sign and laughed drily. "You call this not giving up? The edges of the cardboard are soft and twisted from use. This is survival, not stagnation." "You're here," Elon said, "and you continue to show up." Bernie's frown softened as he glanced at him. "What more is there? The streets aren't nice, but I've seen worse." Elon cocked his head in curiosity, asking, "What do you mean?" "You would think that being homeless is the worst thing that can happen, but it's not. I've seen decent guys who I fought beside go insane. Some of them didn't survive it, and some of them ended up like me." Bernie shifted once more, rubbing his hands together against the cool evening air. "However, the fact that I'm still here means something, doesn't it?" Elon stated in a firm voice that it means a lot. For a brief period, the two men sat in silence as the sound of far-off traffic filled the air between them. "If you could have anything, what would it be?" Elon broke the stillness. Surprised by the directness of the inquiry, Bernie blinked and paused, his fingers twitching the margins of his sign in an honest attempt to feel productive once more. "I can fix automobiles, motorcycles, and even agricultural equipment with my mechanical talents. If I had some small shop tools, I could start afresh with some clients." Elon nodded seriously. "Why haven't you tried?" Bernie gave a shrug. He gestured at his surroundings while wearing a tiny, sour smile. "It costs money to initiate such an endeavor." Elon leaned back and took out his phone, saying, "It's hard to come by," as he browsed through his contacts. Bernie arched his eyebrows, saying, "All right, let's begin with housing." Elon tapped his screen in response. "I know of a facility that can assist. It's short-term, but it's safe, clean, and a decent place to start over." Bernie's doubtful expression softened into one of cautious optimism as he blinked. Elon looked up, a tiny smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Bernie looked at him and said, "I don't say things I don't mean." It was difficult to accept that this moment was real because of the weight of years of being disregarded and ignored, but something in Elon's tone, his unwavering resolve, gave Bernie hope that everything would be all right. "Let's see where this goes," Bernie murmured in a voice that was practically a whisper. As Bernie sat silently, watching him with a mix of interest and incredulity, Elon's fingers ran swiftly across his phone screen. A few moments later, Elon held the phone up to his ear and said, "Hello, it's Elon," in a calm but direct tone. "I need a favor." Words like emergency housing and veteran help flowed through the air, each hitting Bernie like a strange concept, but from Elon's perspective, the debate seemed serious. After a few minutes, Elon hung up and turned back to Bernie, saying that no one had said such words for him in years. "Okay," he stated, his phone slipping inside his pocket. "A bed will be available for you tonight at Horizon Haven, a veteran assistance organization located roughly 10 streets away." Elon shrugged a little, saying, "It's not much, but it's a start." "You'll get meals." Bernie looked at him in disbelief. "A cozy bed and individuals who can assist you in determining your next course of action." For a brief time, Bernie's pride erupted as his fingers gripped around the edge of his sign. It wasn't easy for him to accept assistance. He inquired in a suspicious tone, "Why are you doing this?" Elon just replied, "I can, and because someone ought to." Bernie relaxed his hold on the sign and lowered his gaze. "I'm not sure what to say," Elon replied, "but I'm not done yet." "What do you mean?" Bernie's head jumped up. Elon took out his phone once more and began browsing through emails. "You mentioned that you wanted a shop to mend things," so Bernie reluctantly nodded. "Yeah, but like I said, that's a pipe dream." After tapping the screen, Elon held the phone out to Bernie and said, "Select one from the list of nearby commercial spaces for rent." Bernie stopped and looked at the television. "Are you kidding me?" "I appear to be making a joke," Elon asked with a faint smile. Bernie paused, his thoughts whirling. "You don't have to, but I can't afford something like this," Elon remarked, putting the phone down. "After I pay the first 6 months' rent, it's up to you to make it work." Bernie felt tears welling up in the corners of his eyes as he looked at Elon, searching for any sign of dishonesty, but all he saw was a quiet resolve. "You do that for me for someone you just met," Elon said, "because you're a Marine and have served your country, and now it's time someone served you for the first time in years." He cleared his throat and swiftly wiped them away. "I'm at a loss for words, but I'll try." Elon stated okay. Bernie gave a hesitant laugh. "I'll attempt." Bernie clasped Elon's hand, bringing him back to the present moment for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, and Elon stood there offering to help him stand up. "Good, let's get you to Horizon Haven first, then we'll figure out the rest." 2 weeks later, Bernie was standing in the center of a small garage in Oakland, California. The room had a metal and oily odor, sunshine streamed through wide windows that were stained with dust, and shelves lined the walls, holding hammers and wrenches. An ancient motorcycle was on a hoist in the corner, along with a number of tools he hadn't used in years, waiting for the type of attention that only Bernie could provide. Gratitude and disbelief washed over him as he ran his palm down the workbench. Here was his shop, his second chance. It wasn't much yet, but it was his. The front sign said, "Bernard's Repairs, Bikes, Cars, and More." Bernie was left to make it work after Elon had made sure everything was prepared, including the first month's rent and the initial inventory of equipment and supplies. Bernie was startled out of his reverie by a knock on the open garage door and turned to see a middle-aged guy. "I'm Bernie, with salt and pepper hair, clutching a clipboard." Bernie answered, crossing Mike's name. "I run a construction company down the road," the man stated, firmly shaking Bernie's hand. "Elon mentioned you might be able to help us with our fleet." "Fleet?" blinked Bernie. Mike laughed and said, "There are about a dozen trucks that break down all the time, and getting them serviced at the big shops costs a fortune. I would prefer to deliver it to a local person if you are capable of doing the work." Bernie responded boldly, "Bring one in and I'll show you what I can do," and his chest clenched not out of fear but out of enthusiasm. Mike smiled. "That sounds good. This afternoon, I will forward the initial one." Bernie leaned against the workbench and shook his head in surprise as Mike walked away. It hadn't even been a month and he already had his first big client. He recalled that night on the curb when Elon sat next to him and asked him what he needed. At the time, it had felt like a dream, but now it was real. Later that week, while he was adjusting a carburetor, a familiar figure showed up at the door. Elon stepped inside wearing his typical black t-shirt and jeans, grinning better than I ever imagined, and wiped his hands on a rag. "So, Bernie?" Elon asked. "My first big client already." Bernie nodded and asked, "How did you know?" Elon grinned and said, "I might have told him about you because I thought you needed a boost." "You're something else," Bernie said, shaking his head, "just making sure you have the tools to succeed." Elon looked about the store, taking in the well-organized pandemonium, and observed in a casual yet honest tone, "You've done a lot with the place. It's a start." With pride in his voice, Bernie stated, "But it's mine, and that's what matters." Elon nodded before taking a tiny envelope out of his pocket and giving it to Bernie, who gingerly opened it, his eyes widening as he took out a check. "Why is this referred to as a safety net?" Elon stated that it would cover an additional 6 months' worth of rent in case business slows down. "I understand that establishing a business is difficult, and I don't want you to feel alone." Bernie gazed at the check, his throat constricted. "Elon, I'm not sure how to express my gratitude because you already have." Elon said simply, "You've shown me what resilience looks like, now it's my turn to support it." Months later, Bernie's shop had grown to be a community hub, with customers dropping off cars, construction workers chatting, and even local children stopping by to watch him work. The garage was bustling with activity, with framed pictures of Bernie time in the Marine Corps now adorning the walls. Word of Bernie transformation quickly spread, and one day a local news reporter showed up to cover his story. Cameras caught the grease-stained veteran standing proudly in his shop, talking about the journey that brought him here. He didn't hold back when talking about the difficult times, the PTSD struggles, the loss of his family, and the years spent on the streets, but he also spoke with hope. "I thought I was invisible," Bernie told the reporter, "but that night, someone saw me, and everything changed." The story went viral, with articles applauding Elon's surprising generosity and Bernie's tenacity, and social media was ablaze with conversations about how one act of kindness can have a profound impact on people's life and the value of giving them another chance. When asked about his role in an interview, Elon, who is naturally modest, said, "I didn't do much. Bernie already had the grit and the skills. I just gave him a platform to use them." For Bernie, the experience wasn't just about rebuilding his life, it was also about finding his purpose again. He began providing free repairs for veterans in need and partnered with local organizations to train young people interested in mechanical work. One evening, his shop transformed from a business into a symbol of resiliency and community. Bernie drove to the Veterans Support Center at Horizon Haven after shutting the store. "This place saved me," when he entered with a check made out to the center for a percentage of the revenues from his shop, which had been his first step off the streets. The staff, many of whom had witnessed Bernie at his lowest, were moved to tears when Bernie told them, "Now, I want to make sure it keeps saving others." His journey wasn't just a victory for him. It was evidence that even the smallest spark of hope could ignite a transformation. Back at the shop, Bernie sat on the same stool where he'd worked on his first repair months ago. The garage was quiet now, and the tools were neatly arranged and the buzz of achievement filling the air. He reflected on the man who had sat next to him on the sidewalk that evening. The response to the straightforward query, "What do you need?" for Bernie, was more than just a place to live. It was the opportunity to be noticed, heard, and to feel appreciated once more. Bernie's story serves as a potent reminder that everyone has a story worth hearing, that no one is really invisible, and that sometimes all it takes to make a difference in someone's life is the will to listen and take action. When combined with action, compassion can transform even the most dire situations into chances for change and hope.